people in this seminar are L2s. About half, and then plus above. A few. Okay, that's about what I expected when giving this seminar. And I was worried that some L1s might not feel that this would be a good fit for them. However, part of moving towards L2 is becoming familiar with the things that L2s will be doing. Also, if you are not yet had the opportunity to advance to L2, it doesn't mean that you can't start doing these things before you become an L2. You may not have immediate access to L2s in your area where coaching new judge candidates might happen before you actually get an opportunity to L2. So by no means is this intended to be exclusively beneficial to L2s and above. However, oftentimes I may refer to L2s, and that just means you are acting as an L2 in this particular way, even if you are not yet an L2. But part of our duties and I guess our role as L2s in the program is bringing in new L1s. Okay, I haven't certified some insane number of L1s. I'm not even of the belief that that's something you necessarily should be doing. However you determine how many and which L1s you want to work with is a totally separate seminar. But assuming that you've decided, I think this guy would be a great candidate, I want to commit my time to help him or her move to becoming a judge. How do you do that? And that's the purpose of this seminar. While I haven't certified a ton of judges, I'm a tutor, and working with people one-on-one and teaching them things is something that I do have various skills at that people who don't normally teach people may not have in their arsenal. So, before I break my phone and I'm able to use my notes on it. Okay, so I did introduce myself already and I said who I am. Okay, once you decide to work with a candidate, if you decide that you want to work with a candidate, there's two real key areas that you might want to focus on, and typically with each candidate, they will need more help in one of these areas than the other. The first one is their ability to pass the L1 exam, okay? And that's probably the first thing that pops in your head when you thought of, I need to learn how to teach people to become L1s. This is the easiest thing to teach you how to teach. It is easy to teach someone how to teach material that's on an exam. The first thing is you need to know what's on the exam. If you haven't tested in a while, do you know what's on the L1 exam and how to make sure that the people you are teaching know what's on the L1 exam? You know. Anyone else want to offer what they know is on the L1 exam? Alert.
Power and toughness layers.
Power and toughness layers.
Combat.
Combat. Parts of a turn. Joe?
Judging at regular.
Judging at regular.
Steps to casting a spell.
Steps to casting a spell or acting availability.
MTR sections 210 and appendix B.
Anyone else? Handling triggered abilities. Yeah. Anything else? I think there's two more that are listed. Yeah. No. The L1 test does not currently test any IPG knowledge. It doesn't mean it's not beneficial to teach this to your candidates. However, for the portion of them being able to pass their test, not a high priority. State-based actions, yes.
Also the parts of the term.
Parts of a term already named. Additionally, keywords and standard. Okay? While Miracle just rotated for standard, that was one where I had many of my candidates all struggle with initially. Because on the exam itself, it may provide you with reminder text, which for many abilities is sufficient, but for other abilities is not. The way Miracle reads in the reminder text is in no way similar to the way it reads in comprehensive rules. So reminding your candidates that every keyword that's available in standard, their knowledge of how it works in the comp rules might be tested is important. Oftentimes when people decide that they want to become a judge, it starts because they start by playing Magic, as you may recall when you first became a judge. And they think, I have a pretty good grasp of how things work, so I'll be a great judge. And that may be true. However, their understanding from the get-go is limited because they've come from a framework where I only need to know the rules so well because I have judges available to help me. So once you're making that breach to becoming a judge, giving giving your candidates the concept of the formal knowledge of the rules and not just the how it works from a distance knowledge of the rules. While most players could describe to you how Miracle works, the intricacies on which they may test you on the exam may be above what they even realized was an issue or a gap in their knowledge. So we've covered all the main areas now that are tested on the exam, and hopefully at least one of those was like, oh yeah, I forgot that was something that might trip up a new judge. Once you've identified these things, or you're comfortable that you know what all the things you need to teach someone is, you need to make sure they know. Yeah.
Is there a resource somewhere where we can see these?
So that list of things, where I located it was on the Judge Wiki, on the main page of the Judge Wiki, on the bottom, right, it's sectioned into 4 main subcategories. One of them is testing or becoming a judge. And the very first one, there's one that says welcome to level 1, and there's one that says testing for level 1. And under testing for level 1 is where you'll find the list of bullet points that I found, which we've now named them all. There may be others that aren't, maybe that list is not inclusive, but I'd say it's going to get you, it probably covers 99% of the questions in the pool from my experience. Now that you know, these are the things that your candidates need to be comfortable with to be confident that they'll pass their test, you need to make sure they know. And the way you do this can be varied, and I've actually experimented with a couple of different ways. The way I'm most comfortable with now is I'm sort of creating this bullet list for them in written paper during a conversation. Okay, I don't have one that I just print off or email to them, because then it immediately is a reference point for them, which is good. But it could be more than a reference point. By going through them step by step and writing them out, that is going to help their learning process. When they see you take the time to write out each one, give them an example, and maybe notate the example, and then at the end they've got a study guide that maybe is the same as the printed one you might have pre-prepared, but it's going to have a much different impact on them when they go to return to it and study. They're going to remember the time that you wrote it down for them and went over those examples. So creating a deliverable study guide for them is one of the very first things I do once I'm meeting with a candidate for the first time and after they've shown me that they're a candidate I want to work with. Providing them with a deliverable will increase their ability to identify what they need to do to take the next step. And that's generally my guideline. When I'm done meeting with them for that session, I want to know that I've given them something that they can work on, and when I see them next time, I can ask them about it. And if they haven't done anything with it, like, that's a totally separate issue, right? That's up to you to decide if you're willing to work with someone that isn't motivated, or how you want to deal with that. We're going to talk about motivation later on. But providing them with a deliverable gives you a way to make them feel like they have what they need to take the next step. Even if that's like a miniature step before they test, they have what they need to move forward. Next. Okay, the first time I work with a candidate, what I typically do, and I'm fortunate in a certain way that I have access to a store that's super flexible with the way I run F&Ms there. Oftentimes I'm able to have my candidate come volunteer for an F&M, and I can just first get an idea of where they're at, both on a customer service basis and on a rules basis. The second part of what we need to make sure they are capable of is customer service stuff. And getting a grasp on where they're at in their social interaction with players is really only identifiable by watching them interact with players. So oftentimes what I'll do at an F&M, the first time I work with them, I'll have them shadow me, I'll have them shadow me on a call or two if calls come up, and then after they've seen 1 or 2 examples of things that I do, without giving them any instruction, I just ask them to take the next call. You want to see what instinctually they're already good at. And then you want to make sure you let them know that they are good at that. When you focus your attention on the things that they need improvement on, it starts to stack up. When you're brand new and getting into the judge program, there's going to be tons of things that you don't know how to do right. So identifying the things that they're already naturally good at is as simple as, hey, I noticed the way you interacted with that player. You totally diffused that situation in an awesome way. I'm not going to have to spend as much time with you talking about that sort of thing because I can tell that's going to be easy for you. And that gives them the confidence to say, oh, awesome, I've got half of this judge stuff under my belt already. Even if they have room for improvement, it lets them know that, hey, now you need to focus on this other thing that you're not as good at. And that might be the rules if it's the person who's good at customer service and vice versa. In my experience, it's literally been super polarized, where they're naturally great at customer service or they're naturally great at rules. I'm sure there's people who are great at both, but when you're first starting out, you're going to be weaker in one area or the other. So identifying that is really important to gauging how you're going to coach this candidate going forward. So when you're taking when you're watching them perform, from a customer service standpoint, you want to identify, okay, how good are they at this? What are some ways we can tweak their approach to make this easy or hard or whatever? And then secondly, if the calls that were provided in that event weren't sufficient to really find out where they're at in a rule standpoint, you want to take the interactions that they did make rulings on and just make them one step more complicated. Because you've established a base of what they do know by the rulings that they took, and then you just want to step by step make it more complicated, because if you go from super easy, how do I tap a land for mana question, into the next question that's suddenly way more complicated, you don't find out where the knowledge gap is. It could have been any number of things between this easy question and the super hard question. So by making the questions step by step incrementally more complex, you get the ability to identify where their gap is specifically. And the reason why that's important is because the candidate is very infrequently going to learn from the complex example where they didn't know a whole bunch of parts of it. But when you can say, there was this one aspect you overlooked of this rule, you can point at the specific one rule that they missed the interaction of in the comp rules, and that allows them to attach the example to the formalized rule. The reason why I like attaching their thought process to the formalized rule is part of their job as a judge is explaining rulings to players. They're still in the mindset of, I get how it works, I know how to get to the end result when I'm playing with someone, but can they explain the end result to another player when they don't agree? So making sure that they start to understand the formalized language and slowly integrating it into the way they deliver rulings is going to really help them be consistent with the way other judges sound when they deliver rulings. And while we all want to have our own styles and flavors, when it comes to describing comp rules, we essentially want to be all speaking the same stuff. Okay? So that's one of the things that I'm looking for when I ask rules questions to sort of see where they're at is, where's your specific gap and how deep is your comp rules knowledge? So that's usually next on my list when I'm working with them at an event. And then the homework aspect. So like I said, I want to provide them with some kind of deliverable that they can continue to work on until the next time I see them, and then intend and do follow up with them. If even one time you forget to follow up with them on it, instantly these assignments you give them seem meaningless to them because they didn't have any feedback from you after they performed it. So performing the feedback with them is really important. If maybe the assignment you give them is, hey, go take a rules advisor's test and we'll see how it goes and I'll help you out. That means they should take the rules advisor's test and come back to you with their results. If they're not willing to do that, then you need to address motivation. Okay? Motivation for judges typically comes from a variety of different places, but even just looking at the judges that you work with the most, you can start to see, like, this is the person who cares about big events. This is the person who cares about reviews. Show them what you care about, right? I always tell the judges in my area, this is why I'm passionate about being a judge. And ask them, why are you passionate about being a judge? David Zimmett, who certified me, asked me that question, and I was like, well, I don't know. I kind of want some, formalized way to show that I know the rules, and I like magic, and and I just didn't have any concept of what different things a judge might want to be passionate about. Right? So engaging them on that level and showing them sort of the different things that judging will bring for them that they don't normally see as a player will help them get excited about something. And that something is what you want to latch onto when you talk to them about motivation. For example, I have a candidate who's really excited about being able to travel to events. And like I said, it's going to make your life a lot easier to get to events if you're certified and I can help get you on staff. So like giving him the confirmation, hey, I might be able to help you get on staff, so all you need to follow my ideas to help you get past this hurdle, and then I'll be able to help you get on staff at events that I'm working on. Or maybe their priority is, hey, I want to be able to get a little bit more respect at my store. Then let's go to more of a social issue, and you can help them with that if you're comfortable doing that. So as being the mentor in this case, it doesn't always mean that you're coaching them at the specific things they need to pass the test. You also are going coaching them on the softer skills that they're going to need to be successful in the judge community, which for their local store may or may not be as important, but if their goals are to expand beyond their local store, they're going to want to really improve those skills. Some of those skills include, and ways to teach them, always makes them explain their answers in detail. And this ties into the idea of having them formalize their language. So when you present them with rules questions, and what you probably notice from the judges you consider to be your mentors and leaders, is they'll ask you, and they won't give you too many pointers on where to start. And you might be starting down totally the wrong path, and they're not going to stop you and say, no, your first bit was wrong. They want to see your whole thought process planned out. Okay? How did you get from the beginning of, maybe your error was at the beginning, but we want to see all the logical steps that you made to get to the conclusion. Because again, identifying the individual issue that's causing them to get that piece of information incorrect is going to be the best teaching point for them possible. Secondly, it's how they should be explaining calls to players. Okay? By having them explain their logic clearly, it shows them the way that they can explain things to players. For example, I had a candidate recently who I was giving him a very typical power toughness related question that involved a flux charger and dynacharge or something. And for him, it was a difficult question because he wasn't familiar with power toughness sublayers. But getting him to say, well, I think it would end up like this. I think his power toughness would be a 5-3. While he may have gotten to the right answer, he may not have had the right logic. Okay, so having him break it down is important just to identify that he has his rules knowledge correct, and that if he were to explain it that same way, the players in the match would accept it. Okay, because as most of you know, when you deliver a ruling, exuding the confidence that you know your rules knowledge is going to be the big difference between them accepting your ruling or not. So teaching them that presenting it in this certain way will cause people to follow their conclusion from here's the scenario to here's the way we're going to resolve this scenario, gives them the ability to see how explaining that process will help them get the conclusion they want. So those are the things we want to teach. Those are the easy stuff, right? That's like a checklist I'm providing to people who are like wanting to become L2 and want to know what it's about. But once you're an L2 and you know, okay, these are the things I need to teach my L1s, how do I teach them? Okay? It depends on what kind of learners they are. And you hear people talk about visual learners or audio learners. I tend to use a different type of language, and it doesn't mean that I'm right. This is not from any study. This is just from the way I approach my clients when I'm tutoring them. There are learners that want to learn by experience, or they shouldn't say want to learn by experience, learn best by experience. There's learners that learn best by logic, and there's learners that learn best by repetition. And I typically divide my students or my candidates in one of those three categories, and that's going to affect the way I approach our sessions together or our meetings together. Logic-based candidates tend to be great with the rules, right? The rules of magic have been set up in a way where a logical computer can process them on Modo 99% of the time correct. So logic-based players tend to be great at, or judges tend to be great at learning rules interactions as long as you explain the rule to them. They may not have read the rules. So if they don't know the rule, they might not get the question correct. However, once you explain it to them and show them one example, they'll be able to apply it in the future. So they're going to be easy to manage from a rule standpoint, but they might be tougher to manage from a customer service standpoint. The reason being logical players or logical learners tend to assume that everyone learns the same way as them. And in fact, most people tend to assume everyone learns the same way as them. And logical learners are no different. So they assume that when they approach a table and they express things in the logical way that makes sense to them, that the players should accept it too. And they don't wait to make sure that the players actually understand it. So what I like to teach people, and this is also valuable for teaching, so we're really teaching people how to teach in a way, right? You're teaching your L1 how to teach players, right? And I'm teaching you guys how to teach your L1. So one of the things that you look for in body language to make sure people understand you, and I consider myself a logic-based learner, so this is one of the things that I've keyed in on to make sure my non-logic-based learner that's across from me that I'm teaching is understanding me is body language cues. And a lot of these are fairly straightforward if you've been in any sort of teaching capacity before, and when I say these, they might make sense initially, but if you're not looking for them, you won't see them. One of the big ones is there's different ways that people nod at you when they're listening, okay? And I've been watching. There are a few of you who, in the middle of my sentence, will start nodding. It's because I know that you're seeing the connection I'm about to make, and you're making it along with me as we go. And you nod and tend to follow the cadence of my speech because you're waiting for the next word to come out because you think you see where I'm going, okay? That is someone who understands what you're saying. Someone who is staring at you, and once you finish and you're waiting for a response, then they start nodding, almost guarantees to not understand what you said to them. Almost guaranteed. And even though the physical action they did was nodding, what they did is actually very different. The nodding begins once their understanding begins. And until you shifted the focus of, oh shit, he stopped talking. He's waiting for me to respond now. I need to give him something. They do that, okay? That almost always tells you that something is missing. So if I see that, I don't want to say, it seems like you don't get it. Because they just told me they got it by nodding, and they don't want to be called a liar. Okay, so don't do that. What you do instead is, okay, so now that we've talked about this, let's talk about a new scenario, and you give them maybe a slightly more challenging question. This is the opportunity for you to incrementally increase the challenging question that's along the line you're trying to teach, and show them that they don't get it, okay, without you telling them they don't get it. Because until they either verbalize to you that they don't get it and give you an opportunity to explain it to them more, or they illustrate it to you in some other way by making a mistake, you're not going to know where they need improvement. So that little thing, and it's not just true for this, for almost anything. It's probably similar when you explain magic to someone who doesn't play magic. At first, maybe they start nodding, okay, it's a card game, yep. And then they just lose you and they start staring. And at the end they go, yeah, this seems really interesting. And they start nodding again because they've been prompted for a response. It's much different when someone nods on their own than when they've been prompted for a response. So that's something to look for when you're teaching someone and you want to identify if they're really grasping onto what you say. As a logic-based teacher, that's something I need to look for because I assume when I state things in an order that follows a logic process that they're following it. And that's something to look for. Experience-based learners. Experience-based learners, you can tell them something a bunch of times, but it's not going to click with them until they actually get a chance to try it. For me, that doesn't work so well, but for others, it does. So typically, and like I said, most learners assume other learners are just like them. I start with a logic-based approach because I assume they're logic-based like me. Once I see the I don't get it nod, then okay, next on the list is experience-based. Okay, let's have you try an example, okay? Like I said, incrementally increase the difficulty of the question, let them illustrate an example, and see where they're having trouble. And then the third group is repetition-based. Some people are going to have a lot of difficulty learning, period, okay? And this isn't a joke. Okay, if you're willing to work with someone that has difficulty learning, props to you because it's a challenge. Okay? And there are a lot of ways to help someone that has difficulty learning a structured thing like magic rules. One of them is forcing them to repeat things. And while it may seem trivial to you, to them it is very valuable. And it may be the minimum of you explaining a keyword to them in detail and then saying, now tell me. Have them repeat back the exact same thing you just said to them to say that, okay, so now you know this, and then have them write it down. So that two-step process of hearing it, repeating it back to you, and writing it down is going to be one of the best ways you can expect them to retain it the next time it comes up for them. And again, it creates a deliverable for them to take home and add to their study material. Typically, these types of learners are the ones that are going to need more advanced time to study to actually prepare for the test. So creating almost like a binder for them by the time you've finished preparing them when they're ready to study. Now they have a binder. They have the study guide you guys created on the first day by covering all the different things that are covered on the test. And then each time you covered a rule, they had difficulty with them. Maybe they had a half a page where they had to repeat the rule and then write down the interaction you talked about. And if they ever need to go back over it, they can. Or if they're the type of judge who wants to throw it in their bag and reference it while they're at an event, like, great. If this is less unwieldy for them than clicking around on the comp rules, awesome. However, when you're working with this type of person, you should be, as part of this process of writing it down, you should be having them look it up in the comp rules and reference the rule number on their notes. We want judges to be good at looking things up on the comp rules, not memorizing the comp rules. So point them to the wiki. The wiki is awesome for searchable comp rules that are linked to each other, and there's even a section on the wiki that gives practical examples of why these rules are important for many of the different comp rules. So if, especially for people who are struggling, that's going to really help them solidify why each rule is important for them to know once they see the example in the game of Magic that makes it important. And so checking out that list or coming up with ones of your own of why each rule is important is really going to help some judges remember that rule if it comes up in a different case. Show why it's important. Lead by example. Unless you're Josh, you probably don't know every rule. So I always always find my local L1s and talk to them whenever I mess up a rule in a GP. And I joke around in my community, my par is 1 rules punt per day at a GP. This weekend actually was better than average for me, so that's good. But it happens. So showing them it's okay to make rules and showing them that you learned from it shows them why making mistakes isn't bad. Because the fear that new judges are going to have is, I don't want to make a ruling because I don't want to make a mistake, but everyone in this room knows the only way you get better at making rulings is by making rules. Diversity, rules, knowledge, motivation. So motivation, the one thing I did mention already about motivation is showing them why being passionate about things in the judge program feels good, and why it's important, and why it's added value for you, and helping them come up with things that actually motivate them is a great way to do it. Some judges are going to need more motivation than that. For me personally, they're going to need to exhibit something special for me to want to continue with them if I hand them an assignment and a week passes and they've put no thought to it. To me, I'm going to say, okay, whenever you have a chance to complete what we were working on last, let me know and we'll proceed. And there have been a handful of candidates where that's the last time we talked about it. And I'm okay with that, but that's my line of what commitment level I want from my candidates. And it's up to you to decide on your own. If you feel like there's a candidate who isn't motivated on your own, but you really want to see them get a part of the program, maybe because you want to spend more time with them at events, or you think they really have something that would help the program, but they don't see it yet, don't be afraid to incentivize them to proceed. I've got like 5 or 6 Star City judge mats. I'm sure you guys have all seen the old ones that look like the back of the judge sleeves that have a really cool pattern on it. Judges love those, or players think they're cool looking, right? So I don't need 6 of these. By incentivizing them, hey, if you actually get on your horse and apply to a competitive event and get on, which I will help you get on, then I'll let you have my judge mat. To them, it's like this cool thing, oh my gosh, we only get these judge mats in certain places, and to me, I've got 7, right? So that's one way that L2s can bring the big event lifestyle back to your local area and give them a taste of, hey, this is how the judge community supports each other. You don't need 12 judge mats, right? So that's just one way you can think about motivating people if your standard procedures aren't working in that way. Are you trying to stop me? It looked like you're trying to stop me. No. Okay. Stop. Your name. Stop me. And we had another question about the certification process. So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, I'm sure most of you have been through it. There is an L1 exam, okay? And we talked about the things that are covered on the L1 exam. And as you know, it's a multiple choice exam, it's a paper exam, and it's closed notes. One of the things that I always provide, and most typically do take advantage of, is basic lands. You do want to give them the basic lands, and I often encourage them to write on them what the cards are and physically manipulate them. Especially if you've identified them as the experience-based learners that we talked about, giving them the opportunity to physically manipulate the cards in front of them will help them think of, I'm in a game, how does this work? Instead of getting befuddled on the logic-based approach of how do these rules interact. So oftentimes what I'll do is I will write on one of them for them. Like, I would write on it like this and show them how you would write on it, just so they get that idea of, oh, I don't need to do that. By showing them that, like, this is totally normal, you should do this, like, it will make them more comfortable doing that. Provide them the basic lands, encourage them to write on that. So they have the multiple choice exam, which is your responsibility to score and review with them. Secondly, it's your responsibility to write them a review in the Judge Center recommending their advancement to level 1. I have a few things I always like to include on that review, which is how to get access to apps.magicjudges.org and how to apply to events, how to access the Judge Wiki and links to helpful stuff, and then usually at least one or two other outside sources that I think will benefit their weaknesses. If I feel like it's a customer service thing, I'm going to point them to like a Billy San Juan article. Okay? If I think it's a leadership in your community thing, I'm going to point them to a Sean Catanese article. Okay? Something like that they can walk away with and get an idea of what the Judge program can provide from them, and they can explore from there. Once they're in the Judge Wiki looking at something, they'll click around. It will happen. And they'll know how to get to it, which is super important. So there's that. And we also want them to work a couple of events. Okay? So you don't necessarily have to test them at an event. It's usually the most convenient way to do it, but isn't required. So if you feel like there's some anxiety for this player, we're having like a more quiet space. You can meet at a coffee shop, you can meet at your house, you can meet at a game store on a not crowded night and administer the test if they need that kind of separate quiet time to focus on their exam. But you do want them to work a couple of events and get an idea of what judging is like before they agree to do it. Certifying someone to be a judge might make them feel great, but unless they're actually going to go out and work events, it's not actually helping the community very much, which isn't necessarily bad, but it isn't the main reason why we're trying to certify judges. We want to certify judges who are going to work events and will improve the quality of events in your local community. Did that sort of cover what you want to talk about for the certification process?
Not to mention, once you're certified, you have to keep working events if you want to keep your certification.
Right. So yeah, once you're certified, you do need to keep working at least one event a year to keep your certification. And reminding their judges of that is important. Because if they don't know and they let it fall off, then they might have to re-front load all this study time.
So if you want to administer a level 1 test for a level 1 candidate, but you don't want them on they don't have access to a computer or whatever. I know you can administer, you can put their name or their DCI number, you can print it out. I run into this problem before though where you hit a time limit, like when you can then send
Okay. So I know exactly what you mean, I think. And if I'm not on the right track, let me know. But when you create an exam for a new candidate, you're going to get options. One of them will say paper personalized. One of them will say paper event or paper not personalized, batch maybe. Don't print that one. That's intended to print off a bunch of them for a large event in advance. So if people show up and want to test, we have some ready to go to test them with. You want the personalized one because it checks what questions they've already seen before. You enter their DCI number, it checks what questions they've already seen before, and makes sure it doesn't put them on the test again. Secondly, you won't have a time limit. If you print a paper exam rather than having them take it online, and even if they're at the computer, I will still go to print exam, print it out, and have them take a paper exam. That way you have as much time as you want to enter the results and enter your review and get it processed. The things that you will need to print out, they will give you options. You'll need to print the physical exam. It should print with Oracle of all of the cards listed in all of the questions. If it doesn't, provide it for them. From what I understand, if you use a more stripped down browser like Chrome or Firefox, you're going to have better luck than you will with things like Internet Explorer, but your mileage may vary.
Yeah, and check the page breaks. Sometimes it'll cut in the middle of a word, and you need to then fix it before you give it to them.
Yes.
Yeah, just echoing yours, that actually Internet Explorer isn't that bad.
Okay.
But I have had problems with other browsers.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I would make sure before you give your very first test that you identify if you're capable of printing a test. And you can do that just by printing a practice test or something.
Just a tip on that. Make sure you put the candidate's DCI number in.
I have done that. I certified a judge in Georgia that I've never met before. And that was apparently somewhat complicated for CCAT to clear up. And best way to do it, DCI number. No.
Maybe you know that right here, when you're printing it in another language, make sure there are enough questions.
Make sure there are enough questions?
We have to do that.
Okay. in case everyone didn't hear that, if you're printing in a non-English language, there's some risk there may not be enough questions printed on your exam, which I assume means they cannot complete the exam.
But you cannot create.
Oh, they won't even let you. Okay.
Question, we need to be a Judge 70 class.
It's an awesome resource, and that's actually something I have pointed to candidates that aren't able to meet up with me as regularly as they probably need to meet the goals that they have in front of them. Is there is a judge course available on the wiki that will walk new candidates through what they need to know to be able to pass their exam.
I gave a little one test from a week ago, and first of all, it turned out perfect. I was like, wow, they fixed it. But the weird thing was when it came up, it said 101% required.
That is new. That is a new thing. Many exams will now show that the required test score for them to pass is 101%. The reason they're doing that is they don't want any test to automatically show pass. You're going to enter the score as is, along with your advancement review, and once that advancement review has been seen by whoever needs to see that, they will then change that required passing score to the appropriate score and certify your candidate.
I'm just going to echo.
It's an automatic advancement once it's
Right. Exactly. So now as soon as they make that change, there'll be an advancement automatically.
So I'd like to say the same thing I said at a previous seminar, which is if you certify someone for L1, that's not the end of the story. You should keep following up with them afterwards, see if you can find events for them, see how they're doing with the program. You don't just abandon them.
Yes. So one of the reasons why certifying capable L1s is important to me, and probably important to you also, is once they're done with the test, they're going to go work events. And if they don't know what they are doing, who the hell certified you, right? Oh, it was Chad. Oh, great. Chad's L1 again, right? So not only, it does reflect on you. And that legitimately is part of it, right? Like how prepared your L1s are to go out and work events where you are not there babysitting them does reflect on you. And part of your ability to, your relationship in mentoring them should be helping them move forward to whatever their goal is. If that means to work as many competitive events as possible, help them find events. If you're going to be going to an event and you want to carpool with them, hey, I applied to this, you should apply too. Is a great way to do that. Or maybe their goals are totally different, but whatever they are, helping them stay on track for those goals is really useful.
After you submit the recommendation for candidates, what happens? You have to wait to hear back from
There is a brief wait. I've never experienced it being more than 2 weeks before. Usually it's within a week. But as far as I know, it gets read as long as your review says, I think this person should be advanced to L1 and their score is passing, they get advanced. Someone else may be able to add to that.
Yeah, so it's actually, along with the 101% thing that Vina was talking about, it was a bug that advancements to L1 were not automatically happening. There was a guy whose job it was to make that manually happen, and that's why it took 2 weeks. So that has been fixed. So once you enter your advancement review, that candidate is automatically advanced to L1.
So I guess that process has changed. Once you administer the review, that 101 changes to the appropriate number, and they are immediately advanced?
The 101 is actually a hack to make sure that you can't advance without the review.
Got it.
Also, I was instructed very sternly by Brian Schnick not to use the rules advisor test when we are coaching L1 candidates.
No.
He said, do not use rules advisor. You can only use easy practice or practice.
Yeah, or L1 practice. Rules advisor test, while is a great thing to recommend that your candidates prepare with, isn't something that you should be helping them pass.
He said don't even tell them to use it.
Really?
He said, yeah, he said only for candidates who do not have access to a level 2.
Exactly. The idea behind the rules advisor is to give people the authority to help out at their events when they don't have an L2 to help them prepare. So if I think someone isn't really having the motivation where I'm willing to give them my time to help coach them, I might direct them to that. But if I'm working with them directly, I'll be focusing on easy practice or L1 practice tests. I saw a hand over here too.
I was actually just going to say the same thing you were. Like, I actually use the rules advisor as a motivation gateway. So if someone says, I'm interested in judging, like anyone can say that. But if I say, okay, where are you? Have you taken a rules advisor yet? Have you taken a practice test yet? And they don't do that, than what you said earlier.
And I'll echo that too. In that, while I'll say, hey, show me that you're interested. Take a rules advisor. I'm not going to require them to pass it to work with them. It's just a hurdle of, hey, are you actually interested in this, or are you interested for this moment because you thought it looked cool when I made that head judge announcement? No, I will never. Yes, let them explore the judge center, create one on their own if you choose to direct them that way. Did anyone else have any other questions about like teaching or any scenarios they've had trouble with that they wanted to talk about?
How many candidates is too many?
That is personal preference. Like I said, I haven't necessarily certified a ton of candidates, it's going to come down to how much time you're willing to commit to working with candidates and how much time the candidates you choose require from you to pass. If you're working with candidates that are exceptional and just need a small amount of guidance and access to events to move forward, then you might be able to take on a bunch of candidates. But if the candidates you're working with need a ton of help, both with soft skills and rules and training, then it might be difficult for you to work with a ton all at once. Your mileage may vary on that, and it's not for me to say what's appropriate or inappropriate. So I would say continue taking people until you feel overwhelmed with them. Anyone else have anything? Oh, okay. That's what I have about teaching.
I'm taking control.